Buck's walking his dog in the park. A crazy man's waiting for him in the dark. What exactly will it take to get the whole world to shake? The whole world to shake. The whole wide world to shake. Yeah, and I got to go ahead in Virginia. I hate to make you wait another day. Yeah, I have got to go ahead in Virginia.
So when I look back at how things have been accomplished in society, whether it's environmental movements or political movements, it's usually one person who has an idea and then gets the ball rolling. There's always been that lone dancer out in the field. That lone dancer is maybe a little crazy, but their energy can attract someone else to that energy. They have to gather their first nut, and Joni was my first nut. Wally
just has this joy for life and all living creatures, and you can't be around him without wanting to be a part of it. And I'm Joni Van Sickle, and I'm Wally's first nut.
So with Joni, now there were two of us, and we had to gather more followers.
We support Idea Wild because of Wally.
Well, I got into Idea Wild because of Wally.
I support Wally Van Sickle and Idea Wild.
I got involved with Idea Wild, in part because of Wally and Joni.
Because it's all helping Wally to keep the planet alive.
I got involved with Idea Wild because I met Wally in 1987 at the Big Hole National Battlefield.
I've stayed involved in Idea Wild, again, not contributing to the degree a lot of people have, simply because of the commitment and the genuine interest on Wally's part in keeping this going.
Margaret Mead talks about the power of the small, the power of one person with an idea, even if it is a wild idea, and I had that idea.
Wally has been my wild child ever since I can remember. From the time they were old enough to scamper on their own, they were over at what they called the field.
Whatever they could find out there, they would bring it home, no matter whether it was snakes, crawdads, turtles, whatever.
You name it, he brought it home.
Growing up in Rapid City, South Dakota, right next door to this great little field and creek, infused me with a passion for nature and the outdoors. I went on to get my graduate degree in wildlife biology, and along the way, I volunteered on research projects both in Africa and in Australia. Over and over again, I encountered scientists on the front lines of conservation without the basic equipment they needed to do their jobs. For example, I worked with Leon Benn in Kenya, and he didn't have the basic mist nets he needed to study the small birds he was working with. His mist nets actually had holes in them so big, ostriches could have ran through them. Todd Soderquist in Australia worked with nocturnal marsupials, and one night his spotlight quit, and so he couldn't continue his research. He was all bummed out. I said the next day, why don't we just go and buy a new spotlight? But he didn't have the money. I knew I had to do something. It wasn't until I got stranded on a little island on the Great Barrier Reef for 2 weeks and had a lot of time to think about my life that the idea hit me.
I was on the Great Barrier Reef with Wally when this idea was born.
Okay, so Wally comes back from Australia and he starts talking about wanting to start a nonprofit organization to help biologists.
His idea was to be different than most of the NGOs that contributed to conservation efforts throughout the world by making small contributions that had significant impacts on an individual's research project.
From the beginning of Idea Wild, our idea was centered on the power of the small. We wanted to provide equipment grants to conservation projects that would empower individuals on the very front lines of conservation, so they could do big things that would help conserve biodiversity on this wonderful planet of ours. No one else was doing this. There was big money for big projects, but we focused from the beginning on providing small money for smaller projects.
We went to Colorado so that I could use my education and make a living for both of us, and he could pursue Idea Wild full throttle.
Well, the thing with Wally that I think is amazing is, first, that his projects are individual. They deal with individual researchers in other countries, and they're small projects. projects that are small dollar amounts.
I started Idea Wild and mailed out our first fundraising letter. I excitedly checked my mailbox every day, expecting the money would start flowing in. A long 2 weeks went by until that first $10 check arrived from Rob Gibson, a wildlife biologist friend of mine. And that $10 check started Idea Wild. In the first year, we raised $4,000 and bought equipment for 11 projects. I still remember the first project we bought equipment for. It was an egg incubator for an endangered ocellated turkey project in Guatemala. In the past 22 years, Idea Wild has raised over $6 million. We are now averaging about $500,000 per year through individual donations, foundation donations, and events.
If you want to get yourself a seat, jump on in. 5 minutes, we're going to start the verbal auction.
And one of the events I'm most proud of is a benefit auction we hold every year in my hometown of Rapid City, South Dakota. We use this money we raise to buy tools for conservation biologists who are working to conserve the many species that are found on our planet. And over the years, we have gotten the word out to the scientific community that we want to help. Each year I travel to 2 new countries and speak at universities and international meetings, and we invite people to submit proposals to Idea Wild. In addition, I check on projects that we have funded. We now get 40 to 60 proposals per month from people all over the world and provide gear on average to 30 projects per month, a project every single day. Then we ask the recipients to recycle the equipment and pass it on to colleagues. Well, we have provided gear directly to over 4,000 projects. Our gear has been used on over 12,000 projects and counting.
Small dollars, but important in the bigger sense, and that you support the scientist. He then becomes a professor, or he becomes important in the government, and he starts a preserve. And I think it's much more important to do that person to person.
We have funded projects that study sea turtles, tigers, wetlands, indigenous forests, projects that have to do with monitoring fishing operations. We have funded projects that study tiny bugs all the way up to whales. Any project that has to do with conserving biodiversity, we look at.
Idea Wild will fund any living thing, no matter how big or how small.
We've had some great success stories. We provided equipment for Michael Garcia's study of resplendent quetzals in Costa Rica. And as a result of his work, a new national park was created to protect that species and the many other species that are found in the cloud forests of Costa Rica. In Peru, we provided equipment to Renata Leite and her work with short-eared dogs, and that led to the creation of a national reserve the size of Belgium. The power of the small amounts of money funding small projects with big results. I've even had a couple of bugs named after me, Pseudoarmadillo vansiculi and Anthrophora walteri. This is not something I would have foreseen 22 years ago when I started Idea Wild.
Personally, I consider myself to be a scientist, and I don't think we're smart enough to know what organism is important and what one isn't in our ecosystem. And so we need to preserve what's here. We all evolved together, and if we allow something to go extinct, I don't think we're smart enough to know how that's going to affect the rest of us. And Wally's been very important in helping to alleviate that.
Wally has kept the kind of wide-eyed idealism the whole time I've known him. He really does think one person can save the world.
It's just impossible to be around Wally without catching his enthusiasm and his energy and his joy of life and all living things.
The mission of Idea Wild is to minimize the loss of biodiversity by empowering people who work on the front lines of conservation. These people are passionate about what they do, and Idea Wild provides them with the tools they need to do their job. This biodiversity is important to all of us, and in actuality, it is the very foundation of our existence. It provides us with food and fiber and pharmaceuticals, pollination, and peace of mind. Without these complex ecosystems, not a single one of us would be here.
Seeing all over the world like that, to me, is just awesome. Amazing. That one person, naturally with the help of many, many now that are supporting him, but how one person can make a difference.
If he hadn't acted on this idea, who knows what would have happened to our planet. One person with one idea can make a difference.
We have started a movement. We don't have to save the planet. We just need to spend it more wisely. And now have a bunch of people to help me. It does take that one person to get things started, and I guess I got to be that person, that lone dancer. But I've been very lucky to have so many people join me in that dance.
Wally's in some other country, giving those animals a hand. Well, ever since he was a small boy, he's been trying to save the land. The whole world could shake. The whole world could shake. The whole wide world could shake.